Alright, let's see if I've got this to work. Did I grab my old phone instead of my... That I did. Oops, not sure why I had that over here. Let's see if I can get this to pull up on my phone here. Here we go. And that way... Oh, I can hear myself. Don't like that. Hooky dokie. Oh, hi, Chris. How are you? Nobody else is here yet, so don't worry. You got here fast. Okay, so I'm going to be reading this book called Murder Comes to Town. It's by W.H. Beswick, and it is one of the books that I helped to edit. Well, I say helped to edit. I was the editor for this book. It's pretty family friendly. There's very little language, a little bit of gore, but this one's a little bit milder, which is funny because the actual theme of the book is murder. Story is a work of fiction and the product of the writer's imagination. Any resemblance to any person, place, institution, or event is purely coincidental. Aw, and then he dedicates the book to me. Ah! There's Chris. No, I can't hear you. You cannot interrupt me audibly. It's just a live stream. Alrighty. So I'm probably going to pause fairly frequently so that I can interact with the chat. This is going to be super informal. Back in my old days of streaming, I used to do a lot of read-alouds, and I was very strict about not looking at, who was talking, but I'll probably pause every couple of paragraphs or so. By the way, can you guys hear me okay? I sound okay? I'm not glitching out or bugging out or anything? Because before I get settled in, I'm not too loud, I'm not too quiet, all that good stuff. Alright, good deal. Sweet, thank you for your feedback. Chapter 1. Jimmy Evans had been a lot of things. A handsome face with deep blue eyes and winning smile. Tall, with a lean build that maybe had gotten a little soft, but all in all he was a fine example of an American male a little past 30. Riding a Harley-Davidson dovetail added to his macho image. What he wasn't a nice guy. It wasn't that life handed him some bad breaks or a horrible family. Most people, except the young ladies who fell for his outward charms, accepted the fact Jimmy was born not bad, but selfish. Apparently, early in life, he decided that the world owed him, not just a living, but wealth and all that came with it. No one was sure where the attitude came from. His father was hard-working and well-respected in the small town of Diggers Cove. Now, Diggers Cove was no New York or Beverly Hills. It wasn't even a city. It was one of those small towns that rarely appears on a national map, but did occasionally pop up on a map of Oregon. On the other hand, it wasn't quite one of those blink-and-you-miss-it towns. There were 2 gas stations, 2 diners along, with a pretty good Chinese place as far as the locals were concerned. A new Mexican place had opened up and was becoming quite popular. There were rumors of a Pizza Hut opening, which was not only pretty exciting, but gave the old men in the park something to talk about, aside from the debate of where the name Diggers Cove came from. There was no cove as far as anyone could find. There was a pretty decent-sized lake, which was good for fishing and such. Additionally, the name Digger couldn't be found on any of the town records. Since most of the town was on paper, not a computer, Since most of the town was on paper, not a computer, and went back more than a couple of centuries, there was always talk of putting it in a computer, but no one was volunteering to do the work. Maybe next year. So the name remained a mystery. Changing the name had been considered, but rejected as too much work. Besides, Diggers Cove wasn't a bad name. Now, don't get the impression that the people in the town were lazy. They didn't shy away from work, hard or light. They could get the job done. Changing the name would be inconvenient for everyone concerned. The town wasn't a tourist site. It didn't even have a website until a few years back. Some kids from high school set one up as a class project. Then the mayor had to hire someone to take over the site because Kids being kids hinted that Bigfoot and aliens were known to be in the area. That was the biggest excitement to happen in town for a while. A couple of those reality TV shows showed up, but as expected, they didn't find Bigfoot or aliens. Most visitors just stumbled into town when they made a wrong turn on the 5. They rarely stayed long enough to explore the town. It seemed to be stuck in the past in small ways. Yes, it was 2020, but you wouldn't know it. The houses on the tree-lined streets were built right after World War II, or a decade or two later. 2 or 3 bedroom houses that you rarely see nowadays. The lawns and flower beds were all well kept. These were usually passed down from family to family, which meant you actually did know your neighbor, along with everyone else on your street. The town was designed like a huge wheel. City Hall, the sheriff's office, and the post office along Central Park sat in the middle. The streets then spiraled out like a pinwheel. Over the years, a few cross streets had been added, but it was largely unchanged in shape. The illusion of the past was reinforced by the fact that no one in town drove a new car. The locals didn't like new cars with their computers and other wonderful features. It wasn't they didn't see the appeal of these features. The problem with new cars is you can't work on them. Hell, if you tried, you could lose your warranty. Almost all the cars in town came from the 50s, 60s, and 70s. Like the houses handed down through the generations, it was not uncommon to see a car parked in a driveway with the hood up and someone working on the engine. There was usually a small group of male onlookers standing around the car, offering advice and moral support while drinking beer. Although, in the last few years, women started joining the onlookers. Some women worked on the cars themselves, and some men would watch with beer in hand, but wouldn't offer advice unless asked. Times were changing. It was not unusual for someone to come to town and try to buy a car that had been in the family for years. The cars may have been old, but they were kept in perfect condition. A few years back, a magazine had done an article on the city and its cars. Now there was a car show once a year to raise funds for whatever charity was in need at the time. This was the big event, almost as big as the anniversary of Diggers Cove. The town brought in some carnival rides and such. Everyone had a good time. There was a lot of debate about when the town was actually founded, but a date was finally settled on so they could have the celebration. There were still some that complained. So basically, Diggers Cove was a town the future left behind, and that was fine with the locals. Back to Jimmy. Like most young people, Jimmy had left town, not to seek his fortune, but because he'd put a local girl in that delicate position. His father did the right thing by grabbing his shotgun. Jimmy, knowing this, left town before the shotgun could be loaded. His father apologized to the family and vowed to do right by the girl. So when the girl's parents died from the flu, well, everyone got their flu shot the next year. Evans took the girl in and raised her and her son like his own. Don't get the wrong idea. A lot of young people did leave Diggers Cove. Some came back. Most didn't. In Jimmy's case, he would not be missed. It had been 5 years since Jimmy left town. He'd mostly drifted between Los Angeles and Las Vegas. The young man considered himself a gambling man. His luck reflected this as not a reliable source of income. So Jimmy was forced to go from job to job, usually getting fired. Jimmy never fully understood the concept of working for a living. The simple concept you had to show up and work. Now, about a month ago, Jimmy was convinced his luck had changed. His boat, as they say, had come in. The days of cheap motels and crummy food was over. And if everything went according to plan, he would have all he would ever need. Life, or God, seems to have a sense of irony. Sadly, Jimmy had been wrong. His plan was no longer important. What was important was he needed to get home fast. Very fast. Jimmy was now riding the Harley that he had borrowed from a friend. Yes, the friend had been passed out drunk, and taking the bike without asking could be frowned upon, but in Jimmy's mind it was the right thing to do. He had a mission in life. He would return the bike and throw his friend a few bucks. It would all work out. That seemed to be Jimmy's life motto, which, if you were to think about it, was not a very good one. As mentioned, the sudden desire to go home had been spur of the moment. Jimmy had learned something so important he borrowed the Harley, needing to get back to Digger's Cove. Jimmy was thinking about his new plan. It wouldn't take long, a day, maybe two. For the first time, he would get it right. He looked up in time to see who was standing in the road. He had to skid to a stop. Confused and a little angry, he pulled off the helmet. Jimmy had a couple questions. Then he saw the second person. He didn't see the gun, so it must have been a surprise when the bullet smashed into that handsome face. It would be a closed coffin service. And that is chapter 1. Is everything holding up stream-wise? I'm having tea. Having chamomile tea. Awesome. Thank you, Bongo. Sips tea like a lady. Chapter 2. Abby Anderson stood in front of the mirror mounted on the back of her bedroom door. She was studying her 32-year-old body covered by sports bra and panties. It wasn't really starting to show signs of age. Things were not drooping. She wasn't fat. Her belly was flat. Okay, she was a little soft. Far from her high school body. No way she could do splits. Of course, back then, she had worked out every day. She was on the cheer squad and wanted to be homecoming queen. She lost to Becky Ryan, the girl with the biggest boobs in school, and referred to as a good date. Becky was now married with 4 kids and no longer had her prom queen figure either. Her fellow cheerleaders had all left town. Abby had, too, right after high school. Gone to college, got her MBA, and never looked back. Moved to New York, got a great job, and was dating someone she thought was a nice guy. Yes, back then, Abby thought she had it all, but in the back of her mind, she knew she was missing something. Her father got cancer, the same lung cancer that had taken her mother. Both had been smokers, but never in front of her. Abby loved and respected her father. He'd worked hard to make sure she got the life he felt she deserved. He'd even visited her a couple times in New York. Didn't like it much, but did like the pizza. Abby took a leave of absence from her high-paying job and came home. She took care of her father until he passed away in his sleep. It broke her heart that the most important man in her life was dead. Town saw this and tried to help her through her grieving. It was a loss to them, too. Abby's father had been the sheriff for 35 years. It took time for her father to pass, so she had to resign her job. Abby understood this. She held an important position in the company. It couldn't be left vacant, at least not for long. The medical bills piled up, so she sold her apartment to cover them. Went through her savings. Thank God her father had life insurance, so she was able to bury him with the honor and respect he deserved. Since he'd been a vet, an honor guard had been provided. Her father had been town sheriff for 35 years. The new sheriff, according to the local gossips, drank too much. This was proven not to be just gossip when he ran his car into the oldest and biggest oak tree in town. The tree survived. The sheriff did not. He lived, but since he was born there, he was essentially run out of town for damaging the oak. Abby, wanting only to help, took over the paperwork, to keep it up to date and help process the few arrests that were made. Mostly drunks and bringing in one of the Martin brothers. They'd been feuding for 10 years over the property line. Their father left them both half the farm. The problem was their father had been vague on where to draw the line. Every few months a fight would break out, usually at Eddie's Bar and Grill. One or both of the brothers would be brought in and locked up. Once they cooled off, they were turned loose. Now, Digger's Cove, being a small town, meant pretty much everyone knew each other's business. It was well known that Abby had a degree and had taken some criminology classes. More importantly, she'd been a deputy during the summer vacations. It was also known that her fiancé had not only dumped her but taken her old high-paying job. Abby wanted to leave town, but she just couldn't bring herself to leave. She was leaving, but New York might not be an option. She could get a loan from the bank and head back to New York or Los Angeles. Not that she really needed a loan. At this point, her entire life was back in the planning stages. She was just waiting for the new sheriff to be elected, and she would be on her way. Like everyone else, she knew Willis Sawyer was not the man for the job. He had no experience in law enforcement, and he hadn't been born there. Willis probably knew all this too, but he was thinking about the raise in pay and benefits. Then fate, as it always does, played out in the most unexpected way. Abby, who hadn't even been running, was elected sheriff. People just wrote in her name. Knowing the town thought they were helping her out, Abby needed a real job, so they gave her a job. It paid well enough, had good benefits, and wouldn't look bad on her resume. That was 3 years and 3 raises ago. I really gotta get out of this town, Abby said, turning away from the mirror. As sheriff, she was supposed to wear a tan uniform. It made her look dumpy. She opted for jeans and the uniform shirt. The fact she always looked good in jeans probably had something to do with the fashion choice. Abby wore the badge but rarely carried a gun. She knew how to use it. Her father taught her. She just didn't like carrying it. After pulling her long blonde hair into a wavy ponytail, she walked into the kitchen of her father's house, which was now hers. She needed another cup of coffee and breakfast. Not much of a cook, and not in the mood to try, she decided to stop off at Bud's Cafe for some bacon and eggs. The full pot on the automatic coffee maker brought a smile to her lips. After dumping too much sugar and milk into her coffee, she gulped down the life-giving liquid. She closed her eyes and savored the moment, drained the cup, and poured another. Abby walked over to the window and looked out. The for sale sign was gone. Abby lost count of the number of times the sign had been stolen. She decided to sell the house if she wanted to get out of Digger's Cove. Was the town conspiring to keep her here? The fact was, Abby didn't mind the job and was good at it. It just was not New York or Los Angeles. Then the phone rang. Abby glanced at the phone hanging on the wall. It was just past 7. Who was calling? Everyone knew she wasn't a morning person. She snatched up the phone and snapped, "There better be a dead body for you to call me this early." And thus concludes Chapter 2. I see there's still some people hanging out here. What do you guys think? One more chapter? Before we call it a night? Oh, my watch thought I was talking to it, which I was not. Anyone? I think one more chapter. And then I'll probably need to give my throat a chance to rest. Chapter 3. There was a dead body. Abby now wore a cap with the word sheriff printed on the front and sunglasses. Not those mirror things a lot of cops wore. The glasses came from New York. Bright red frames with lenses so dark you couldn't see her eyes. The stick of the sucker she'd grabbed on the way by the kitchen slowly circled around her lips as she sucked, a habit acquired when she quit smoking. She was standing over Jimmy's body with her hand on her hip, no gun to be seen. "Well," she said, "that is a dead body." "What, you think I'd lie about this?" Bruce said. Bruce was one of her 4 deputies. Unlike Abby, he wore the whole uniform, starched and pressed, with a gun on his hip. His shoes gleamed, as did his badge. Abby always felt a little underdressed when standing beside him. Well, all of her deputies, to be honest. Not enough to stop wearing jeans or sneakers. Abby actually only needed 3 deputies, but had 4. She'd been stuck with the mayor's son. Her favor to the mayor was turning into a pain in the ass. That was on her list of things to do today. But now, she had a dead body. Bruce was a good foot taller than her, and wider. The deputy wasn't fat, he was just big, having worked on a farm most of his life. He played football in high school and college, but wasn't good enough for the pros. He came back and was hired as a deputy since his brother got the farm. Bruce had a baby face with red hair that always seemed to be messy. He wasn't the brightest guy, but smart enough to be a good deputy, and he liked working graveyard. Never thought you were, Bruce, Abby said, squatting down and studying the dead body while avoiding looking at the face, or what was left of the face. So what do we do? Bruce asked. Nothing. Murders are investigated by the state. So we're just gonna let the state take our murder? It's not our murder. We don't have a homicide detective or a crime lab. The state police do. They'll lead the investigation. We'll function only in an advisory capacity. That don't seem right, Bruce said, scratching his head. You've been watching too much TV, Abby said with a smile. We leave this to the professionals. Right now we know nothing about this guy. Well, except he was a local who played high school football. Probably a loser since he's still wearing his Letterman jacket after all these years. He might be coming from Vegas, skidded to a stop for some reason and let someone shoot him in the face. What? How do you know that? Bruce asked, staring down at his boss with a doubtful look. You're just messing with me. No, look, Abby said, pointing to the body. It's all there. He's wearing a Letterman jacket that's seen better days. It's blue and gold, Diggers Cove High School colors. We turn him over, I bet we'll find the Screaming Eagle on the back of that jacket. You played football. He's got the pins on the front of the jacket. Pin for each year he played and lettered in football. You can see the skid mark. He stopped right here and someone shot him. The bike didn't crash, it just fell over. One of his legs is still under the bike. Okay, I see that. What about the Las Vegas thing? The license plate on the bike is a Nevada plate. There's a sticker on the corner for a casino. At least I'm pretty sure it's a casino. Pots of luck. What else could it be? Wow, Abby, you should be investigating this. That was impressive. Thanks, but state cops get annoyed if a small-town sheriff sticks her pretty nose into their murder. Bruce, we're the amateurs here. When was the last murder committed in Diggers Cove? December 1919, little over 100 years ago. And that, my friends, is the end of Chapter 3. Thank you to the small group of you who tuned in to listen to me read a little bit, and now I need to let my voice relax because I'm not used to reading. But I would like to do that a little bit more, so I might start from Chapter 4 tomorrow. Bongo, you're up awfully late tonight. I guess it's only 9:30 here. I'm just watching the chat, just waiting. She says, hee hee. Well, if you guys want to see some of the other types of videos that I do, I usually don't do this kind of thing. It's usually like writing advice, editing advice, that kind of stuff. I've been a guest on a couple channels, including I must be tired. I cannot think of the name. It's DC Righthammer, David Gain. Writer's Row. You'd think I'd remember that, because I'm pretty sure I've been on there on 3 separate occasions. But apparently my memory's not that great right now. Yes, stay hydrated, humans. It's good to stay hydrated. Hydration is good, especially with illnesses going around. Hydration and boosting your immune system. But yeah, I hope you guys have a wonderful night. This is very reminiscent of my Twitch streaming days, and it makes me remember how much, what parts of the streaming I liked. There was definitely things about doing that I did not enjoy. Mostly people. I know, no school for the rest of the year. For anyone here in Kansas, it's, and a lot of other places too. But, yeah, I know. So that's, yay for you, I guess. Did your mom tell you that I had a slight fever today? It hasn't really gone down, but it hasn't gone up, so that's good. Hopefully it'll be gone pretty soon, and it won't get worse. Nothing else, though. I'm not coughing, or my throat kind of hurt earlier, but I drank a little water, and it's it's just now starting to hurt again with the reading, so. Oh yeah, I forgot to take my banner off because this is like just the regular streaming software that I use. I thought that I would be able, like, I thought this would be as simple as getting on my phone and going to my YouTube app and hitting the go live button, but apparently now YouTube has a bunch of stupid new rules which make that like impossible to do, so that stinks. But anyway, thank you, William Beswick, for letting me read your book today. And you can actually find it on Amazon. It's the latest one. It's super fun. It's called Murder Comes to Town, in case you missed that at the beginning. And he's got other fun books that I have worked on as well, all of which I have super, super duper enjoyed. And I think you will too. He's got a couple different genres. This one is obviously like the cozy mystery. And then he's got sci-fi and like vampires. He's working on another horror book right now. So like he's a very talented, very prolific author. And I do highly recommend that you guys check out his books. And any other books on my portfolio on my website, because they're all written by talented, hardworking people and people that, keep my bills paid and keep me doing the thing that I love, which is working on books, editing, story development, and all that good stuff. Love you guys, and I'm going to go ahead and start getting ready for bed. Have a wonderful evening. Come back tomorrow night. Can't promise a time, but tentative promise to actually be here and read the next couple of chapters. Adios!